When I was in my early 20s, I used to work at one of the Walmarts here in Topeka, Kansas. It's the one north of the river for anyone interested, and for the most part, it was the most boring, soul-crushing job I had ever worked in my life. Working with the public sucks hard, and as much as you can meet some super nice people on the job, the worst of the worst manage to spoil the entire experience somehow. Most of the worst people are just annoying, making insane complaints about stuff we have no control over. But every so often, someone or some group of people did something that genuinely makes you question whether humans even deserve to exist. Like when someone decided to edit one of the children's books. So, I'm walking down one of the aisles one day when some lady marches up to me like, "Excuse me, young man, but I want to speak to the manager of this place right now." This is way before the whole Karen thing, but this woman definitely seemed like a Karen. I mean, who complains about something in a kid's book? If you don't like it, don't buy it, right? That was my thought process at the time, but honestly, I was really wrong to assume that about her, because she had every right to be angry and disgusted about what she was about to show us, and I actually feel really guilty admitting that right now. Anyway, I knew our store manager was in his office, so being the nice guy that I am, I invited her to follow me to where the staff area was, then wait for him to grab Tim, the manager that was on duty that day. I walk into Tim's office and say, "Hey yo, Tim, some lady's about to blow a gasket over a kid's book." Tim rolls his eyes, sighs, then follows me onto the shop floor to talk to her. It was kind of funny to see him go from, "Screw this lady," to, "Good afternoon, ma'am, how may I be of assistance today?" With this really sunny smile on his face. And I swear, people who work with the public like that could outact Hollywood actors sometimes. Anyway, the lady thrusts the kid's book at him and then starts yapping about how we should be ashamed that stuff like that book was out on the shelves. He takes the book off of her, opens it up, and is clearly about to ask what the problem is, when all of a sudden, I watch his eyes go all wide as his mouth just drops open. He slams the book shut, turns to me and says something like, "Robbie, go check every single kid's book that's on the shelves. Take everything that's been defaced and just put them on the office desk." I remember thinking like, defaced? What do you mean defaced? But I didn't say anything out loud. I just did as he asked, walked back to where the kids' books were, then started flicking through them to see what the deal was. That's when I saw that same sick-in-the-head idiot had not only defaced the kids' book, but they'd done it in the most obscene ways imaginable. It wasn't just that they'd drawn huge, well, let's say, extras on the groin areas of some of the characters, like those were just dumb and gross. It was the characters they'd drawn X's on the eyes of, with captions like, "I'm dead, and your mom and dad are gonna be dead soon too." Then there was this one picture that had like a dad and young daughter playing on a swing set. He was pushing her, and she was all happy, smiling, saying, "Hiya, Daddy." I don't even want to repeat what they changed the speech bubbles to. It genuinely was sickening, the kind of stuff that they had written in there, stuff that honestly doesn't bear repeating. Like, think of the worst possible thing a dad could say to his little girl, then times it by 100, and I remember wondering how seriously messed up a person has to be to even think of stuff like that in the first place. Whoever had done it, they hadn't just done it to one book either. It was every single one on the top of each stack, and they'd even slip some into the backs of the display units too, like they wanted to slip a few in there that we might have missed and still sell or something. All the violent death stuff was one thing, but it was the X-rated stuff that made me feel actually sick as I flicked through the books to make sure all the defaced ones had been removed. Once all that was done and Tim had given the offended lady some coupons as a way of an apology, he went about checking all the security camera footage to find the person or people responsible. That's how we found out something seriously shocking. It wasn't just some messed up customer that was doing it. It was one of our own associates that was editing the books with all that evil stuff. I'm not sure how they run things these days, but back when I was working there at the North Topeka Walmart, we had our own dedicated cleaning team that would clean the place down before opening hours. They'd come into work for a few hours before anyone else was there, and get all the cleaning done before the rest of the team showed up. That's how they had a chance to be alone with the kids' books like that, and when no one was watching them. No one except the cameras, of course. And they would grab a pen from the office supplies section, then head over to the kids' book to deface them in that evil, messed up way. I know they got fired as a result, and I think the legal department tried to sue them for the stock loss or something, but the whole process was really long and drawn out, and whenever I asked Tim about it, he just told me that upper management hadn't updated him on anything. I ended up moving jobs just before I found anything more out, and how it stayed out of the news I have no idea, but I know for certain that the cops couldn't press any charges because she hadn't actually committed any actual crimes, I guess. I think obscenity laws only applied to publishers or public displays or whatever, but you'd think there'd be something you could charge a person like that with, especially because they were trying to expose kids to such evil stuff. I remember walking out of Walmart with a cart full of gardening supplies a few years back. My mom had sprained her wrist and needed stuff picked up for the start of spring, so it was down to me to go grab some stuff for her. I'm loading the stuff into the trunk of my car when I happen to notice someone walking past me out of the corner of my eye. Kinda took me off by surprise, so I turned around out of instinct and ended up making eye contact with this younger looking guy. He looked like 20-something, workout gear, shaved head, totally normal looking guy who looked like he'd been out for a run or something. I didn't want to seem all confrontational or whatever, so I smiled and said, "Hey," and just carried on loading all the stuff into my trunk. Next thing I hear is someone saying, "Was it you?" I turn again, and it's the same guy, smiling back at me, having asked me that question. I'm like, "Was what me?" And the guy responds like, "You know." I sort of chuckle, thinking it was an honest mistake on the guy's part, thinking I was just someone else or whatever, so I tell him I don't know what he's talking about, then just carry on loading the stuff into my trunk. That's when I hear him walking towards me from his footsteps, so I turn around, hoping things aren't about to get confrontational. But those hopes were totally dashed when I saw the look on his face. He looked livid, and as I'm getting ready for the unfortunate event of having to fight a total stranger for no reason, the guy starts screaming at me. "Don't pretend you don't know. You got me transferred. It's because of you I got transferred." He said a bunch of other stuff that might have you censoring this post, so I won't repeat it, but trust me when I say it was language that would have made a stevedore blush. I remember one of the scariest things being how he was still sort of smiling as he started shouting about being transferred. And then as he carried on screaming at me, he went bright red in the face, got this look about him like he was about to murder me, and he actually started spitting as he was screaming due to how out of control he was getting. I'm telling him to calm down, that there's been some kind of mistake, and that's all without even asking what he meant by "got me transferred." But then every time I try to reason with the guy, he almost takes it like I'm trying to gaslight him or whatever, and it just makes him angrier. I don't even know how he managed to conceal it on him, but he pulled out this extendable baton from somewhere and whips it open right in front of me before charging at me. I just reacted, running around my car and screaming for other people in the parking lot to call 911. That was the other scary thing, how most people just stood and watched with their mouths open instead of either calling someone or actually getting involved to help. Then the other really scary thing, the guy's screams as he chased me, they went from actual words to just this wild psychobabble. Just stuff that barely made sense and only had an actual understandable word every 3 or 4 screams. He was completely manic, and it really didn't hit me at the time, but I later found out that he was suffering from a complete mental break. He was way faster than me too, so if it wasn't for me being able to duck and dodge around parked cars, he would have caught up with me in seconds. And then because I didn't have anything to defend myself with, just bags of compost and seeds and whatnot, he might have actually been able to bash my head in, and there's not a thing I've been able to do about it too. Eventually, some hero of a security guard from a movie theater of all places He actually ran over and tried tackling the guy chasing me, but this psycho kid swung at him a few times with his baton, and then the guy was forced to back off and try to tackle him when he had his back turned, which obviously wasn't easy because the kid was in this, Super Saiyan manic state. Every time he got close, the kid just clocked him, turned, and started swinging. But then, that gave me a window to put some more distance between us. The guy might have actually saved my life in that way. Anyway, the cops showed up after what seemed like way too long, but when they tried tasing the guy, it just had absolutely no effect on him. That was the other thing that scared me. I've actually seen a guy getting tased before. It's a long story. And when the wire things hit him, he just seized up and hit the floor like a statue. But this guy, it just had zero effect on him. Maybe it was a broken taser or whatever, but it was still pretty terrifying to see. The cops wouldn't go into too much detail with me, but the kid was known to him as suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, and I went from hating the kid to actually feeling really sorry for him incredibly fast. They'd been getting calls about him for the past 2 days, but he kept on running from the scenes of the calls and getting away before they could actually take him into custody. I don't feel any ill will towards him, and I hope he got the help that he needed. But I'm not kidding when I say he legit could have killed me that day. Easily the scariest thing that's ever happened to me at Walmart.
I worked as a Walmart cashier for a little over a year. I quit in August of 2015 when I went away to college. As a cashier, you see a lot of people in a day, especially at Walmart. And after a while, you don't even see people's faces when you look at them, but there are some people that you see so often you start to recognize and sometimes learn their names. There was this one guy, always in the same Green Bay Packers hoodie and Chicago Cubs baseball cap, that would often seek out my line no matter how long it was, just so he could stare at me and rarely say a word. Whenever he did say anything to me, he would always lean across the register to get closer to my face. He always gave me a really bad vibe, but when I asked other cashiers about him, they said that he had never been weird around them. One of the girls even said he was a close family friend. After that, I dropped the issue. One night after I'd been there for about a year, I was working a 2 to 11 shift. Those shifts were always the worst because you'd be there for 3, sometimes 4 front-end managers, but also because it takes the chunk out of your day when you were actually going to do anything. So I'm down on the self-checkout. It's about 10:15, so I'm counting the minutes until I can shut it down at 10 to 11. The creepy guy comes in the front door and makes a beeline for me at the self-check podium. When I see him come in, I instantly get nervous. He walks up and says, "Can I still buy a cell phone card and electronics?" I told him I only worked as a cashier on the front end, so I didn't know anything about electronics, but he could go back and check. He seemed peeved by this answer, but he walked away without another word. About 10 minutes later, he comes up with a prepaid phone card and said there's no one at the register in electronics, so I activate his card and hand it to him, telling him to have a good night, but he pushes the card back at me without saying a word, and I say, "Is something wrong?" To which he replies, "These minutes aren't on my phone yet, are they?" I was confused by this statement because, of course they weren't. He had just bought the card. I shook my head, and he waved the card in front of my face. "Why the fuck are you just standing there? Reactivate my phone." When he talked, he was so close I could smell his breath, and I was a little scared. I wanted to put in a call to my manager so that someone could come down and help me. This is where I should probably mention that I'm about 5'3", and he is closer to probably 6'5", and very stocky, so he was towering over me, and the thought that he could easily overpower me crossed my mind, but I get so nervous whenever men yell or cuss at me because my dad was never the type to yell or cuss. I took the card out of his hand and he slammed his cell phone on the scanner. I was trying not to let him know I was nervous, but I was terrified. I knew I had never put minutes on a prepaid phone before, but I don't dare tell him that in fear of what he might do. So I read the directions, pick up his phone, dial the number, and as I'm putting in the card number, his phone runs out of minutes. I try to call back and get an error message. I'm at a loss. I meekly hand him his phone back and say, I'm sorry. Something went wrong. I don't know what is happening. As soon as I say it, he takes his phone, opens it up, tries to dial someone, and when it doesn't work, he looks at me with furious eyes. He screams, "What the fuck did you do to my phone? What the fuck?" His voice is echoing in the store, and unfortunately we haven't gotten the end of second shift rush yet, so there is no one around. He closes his phone and opens it again, trying to make another call, but when it doesn't work, he throws the phone down on the scanner again. He says, "I don't know what you did with my phone, but you better fucking fix it." But this comes much more quietly, practically a whisper. At this point, I'm worried he's going to put his hands on me, and I don't know what to do. I put in a call for a manager from my register, and then I say, "I've called someone that might be able to help, but we're at shift change right now, so it might be faster for you to take it to the customer service desk." He picks up his phone off the podium, still mumbling under his breath that I fucked up his phone, and I'm hoping I can get out of there before he comes back, or at least have someone else down at the self-check with me. Another 15 minutes go by, and I don't see him again. As I'm picking up items that people left by the registers, getting ready to shut them down for the night, he comes back and stands by the podium. He still looks completely pissed off, and my stomach has sank. He made that finger motion that means come here without saying anything, and for some reason that makes me even more nervous. When I'm standing in front of him, he leans so close to my face that I think he's about to kiss me or bite me or God knows what. I try to take a step back, but he takes a step forward when I do. A creepy grin comes across his face as he says, "The girl up there fixed it. Simple fix. But next time, I expect you to know what to do. Understand?" I nod because I don't think I can speak. He gets impossibly closer before saying, "I'm sorry I raised my voice. I never should have done that, especially to a pretty girl like you." When he adds the last part, he lightly uses his fingertips to brush my bangs to the side. I took a step back and he said, "Let me make it up to you. Let me buy you a drink." I shake my head. I say, "No thank you, I'm only 19. He says, "So we'll get a couple of beers and go back to my place." Again, I shake my head. "No, it's really okay. I'm not much of a drinker. I have an early morning tomorrow." He looks displeased with this answer and says, "Tell you what, I'll wait over here by the door just in case you change your mind." I smile at him weakly and tell him to have a good night. When I see him walk through the security, I quickly shut down the registers and sign out of mine. Then I run over to find a manager to tell about the whole thing. The third shift manager that I tell looks at me like I'm lying, and when I'm finished says, "I know Todd. He wouldn't hurt a fly. He doesn't have it in him. You're probably just being dramatic." She then turns to another older cashier behind her, shakes her head and mumbles, "Teenagers." I ask if I can have someone to walk me to my car, and they tell me that management is in a meeting and the security guy went home already. So I clocked out and went to the bathroom. I waited in the bathroom for about 10 minutes before coming out and attempting to go to my car. When I walked around the corner through the security things, he wasn't sitting on the bench right there like I had been expecting. I relaxed a little before I realized he was standing just outside the door, far enough away to keep it from closing, smoking a cigarette. He has his back turned toward the door. Luckily, I never went out the front doors. I always went to the corridor and not the side door. I quietly closed the door behind me so maybe I wouldn't catch his attention. I rushed to my car, which was fortunately very close to the building. As I'm quick walking to my car, I hear him shout, "Hey, why are you avoiding me? Come here." At this point, I take off into a full-on sprint, which is not easy because I'm wearing Sperry's, so it's like running in clogs. I get to my car, get in, lock my doors as I'm starting it, and don't even bother with my seatbelt. By that point, he had made it almost all the way to my car and was still yelling, telling me he just wanted to talk. I took off as fast as I could and took the longest way home with the most turns and twists that I could. When I got home, I told my dad about the experience, and he was so angry that no one had answered my calls or believed me. He called the store manager the next day and complained. I was never contacted about his complaint, but from that night on, whenever I saw that guy, I would run to the bathroom, or if I couldn't get away, I would put out my lane closed sign and turn off my light so he couldn't get in my line. And you always hear people talking about the people of Walmart as being trashy, but they never tell you about the select few that are scary as hell.